Trucker Dump, episode 195. In today's show, we got a cheat sheet to prepare for the upcoming largest safety blitz in North America. The agriculture hours of service exemption is coming under fire. Uh-oh. California's AB5 law is back in the headlines. Surprise, surprise. We'll try to find out if electronic logging devices have improved safety as much as the FMCSA says they would. We'll check out the Teamsters, who are having battles on many fronts right now. We'll learn about possible new tax breaks for truckers, and we'll discuss how the new under 21 driver program is coming. All that and more news. Plus, in the listener feedback segment, I'll give you an update on my quest to find out if day cab drivers can legally extend their 14-hour day by using the 14-hour pause aspect of the split sleeper berth rule. Wow, that's a mouthful. Then a listener will explain the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse loophole that baffled me recently. We'll have more on the AB5 thing and what defines an independent contractor. We've got another law of trucking submission, and we hear from a new listener. So sit back, take your shoes off, put your feet up on the dash, and turn it up. Unless, of course, you're driving right now.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com. Resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Hey, trucker dumpers. You remember that old joke that goes, "Hey, does your face hurt? 'Cause it's killing me." Well, that was me this week. I didn't think I was going to get this podcast out at all, and I might still not if things go back to the way they were. So let me explain really fast what happened. Well, actually, I don't know what happened. Only thing I can figure is it had something to do with me mowing the yard in the cold for the first time of the year. And it was really tall, a lot of weeds. Maybe it was allergies. Anyway, my face. Yeah, I don't know what was going on with it, but Monday, like I said, I mowed the yard and then I went to work that night and my face started doing weird things. I started getting this real red skin around my nose and chin and up underneath my eye, a big patch underneath my eye. And it was getting these, like a day later, it was starting to get like these yellowy scale looking things. It was roady. I gotta tell you, I was not happy with the situation. And, I talked to Evil Overlord. She gave me good scolding for having not nearly enough lotion with me out here on the road because, she's prepared always and I'm never prepared for anything. So got my butt chewed, got called a dumbass a few times and that's par for the course. So I'm used to that. But anyway, she finally sent me to Walmart, got some stuff and it's starting to clear up a little bit, but it was very uncomfortable, but there for a while. I was just kind of miserable. I wasn't sick. It wasn't really hurting that bad. It just was miserable. And I just didn't much feel like doing a podcast. But here we are on a Friday morning still, thank God. And I'm just getting started with this podcast. Wow. Okay. So who's the face hurt guy? Todd McCann. That's my name. If you're new to the show, I've been driving a truck for about 26 years. 22 of that was over the road. Last 4 years or so have been in the LTL industry, less than truckload. I used to drive team with the Evil Overlord, who is my wife and ex-co-driver. Never been an owner-operator. Always been a company driver. Never really pulled anything but dry vans. Yes, I'm very boring and predictable. But hey, to top all that off, I am an author of 2 trucking ebooks. The first is called How to Find a Great Truck Driving Job, and the second is called Trucking Life, which includes a 9.25-hour audiobook with it. You can get both of those anywhere you buy your ebooks, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks. Is it called iBooks still? I think it's just called Apple Books now. But anyway, Apple and their names, they always go for the most generic possible. Their app is called Podcasts. Duh. Messages app is called Messages. Phone app is called Phone. Sometimes it's hard to describe to people what you're talking about exactly when you use generic terms like that. So shame on you, Apple. But hey, whatever. They're Apple. They're going to do what they're going to do. But anyway, where was I? But perhaps a better way to get them is just to go to abouttruckdriving.com and search for the ebooks there. There is an ebook combo pack. Get both books $14.98. That's 25% off the regular price. If you go to Amazon, books, Barnes & Noble, wherever you go, you will have to pay full price for those. That is not my doing. I would offer them at a discount if I could other places, but I cannot. So just that's the rules of the ebook market. I don't know. They're weird. I don't like them, but it is what it is. And hey, if you've listened to the first 6 minutes of this show and just think, man, I got to really help this guy support this show. It's awesome already. It's my favorite podcast in the world. Shaw, right? But anyway, you can go to abouttruckdriving.com and click on the tab Help the Show. That'll show all the ways you can help the show. Appreciate you. Now, before we get started in the news, in the last podcast, I talked a lot about being a day cab driver and trying to use the 14-hour extension, by using that split sleeper berth. And there were some questions as to how I was able to do that, which I've always been able to do that. And I didn't know how. Well, we've got some answers on that, but I am going to address it in the listener feedback segment because I got a lot of feedback from the Trucker Dump Slack members over there. Also, a quick note, hopefully you will not hear that the cleaning staff is out in the hallway using their really loud vacuum cleaner right now, and I've got a case of the squeaky chair syndrome today, so bear with me. Well, what say we get on with the news, because honestly my eyes are a little burning and weird because I don't like putting this much crap on my face. My face is just beautiful the way it is. Oker, let's start out with a reminder from CDLLife.com. This one is entitled, The Year's Biggest CMV Blitz is Coming Soon. Here's a cheat sheet on CVSA Level 1 inspections. Yep, it's just what it says. I'm not going to go into all of the details here, but we do know that the CVSA, or the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance's International Road Check 2023 is coming May 16th through May 18th. That's in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. It is the largest safety blitz we have here in North America. This year, they're going to be focusing on anti-lock braking systems and cargo securement. But that is not all they will be looking at. Of course, they're going to be doing full inspections on your vehicle, and this article here has a cheat sheet. It talks about what you need to look for in brakes. Again, I'm not going to go all over these because this is kind of long, but if you want to know if everything's, in order for the road check, make sure you head over here to CDL Life and check that one out. Anyway, there's details on brakes, coupling devices, fuel and exhaust systems, frame, van, and open top trailers, securement of load, steering, suspension, tires, wheels, rims, and hubs. That's about it. And there's a little infographic there on exactly what they're going to be focusing on as regards to anti-lock braking systems, ABS, and proper load securement. So, like I said, this is coming May 16th through May 18th. That's 72 hours where they inspect at least 15 trucks on average every minute across North America. So be prepared for it. Get all the details on this one over at cdllife.com or just click a link in the show notes, which should be in that cool podcast app you're using, right? If not, you can find it at abouttruckdriving.com to search for TD195. That's this episode. Or if you want to get those show notes delivered to your mailbox every single time there's an episode, just go over to abouttruckdriving.com, hit the subscribe button, and sign up for, I don't know what I call it, the newsletter or whatever. Basically, it's just the show notes. That's all it is. And I won't bug you for anything else. Well, maybe occasionally I'll nag you about buying a book or something, but I can't remember the last time I've done that. I do not sell your email address or anything like that, so it's strictly for letting you know about when a new episode comes out and sending you the show notes. So enough about that. Hey, you know what's coming even quicker than the International Road Check this year? Tax time. Yep, April 18th is the deadline. Do you get your taxes in yet? I learned something recently. You can actually file your taxes ASAP and not have to pay for it until April 18th. If I had known that, I would have done this a long time ago, but I'm stupid and didn't realize it. I used TurboTax, and I got to the end and thought, well, I don't have the money to pay for that right now. And I didn't want to pay for it anyway. I wanted to wait. And we were getting money back from Missouri, but we were having to pay into the state, or to the federal. So we were just hoping to get the state. And, then if I realized, I would have gone ahead and filed. We would have had it by now, and then we could have used that money to pay the federal. But like I said, I'm a dumbass, didn't do that. I just got it in the other day. So, at least everything's in on time. And I realized I could set up my payment automatically to be drawn out on April 18th. So, boy, really wasting my time. But, like I say, I did get that filed on like March the 28th or something like that. And they say it takes about 21 days usually to get your refund back from the state of Missouri. So I'm hoping to have that back by the 18th. So I'm not out any money. I come out a whole $47 ahead this year. And part of the reason I don't come out as ahead as I used to is because of this business that I own. Yes, it's a tiny little business. It hardly makes any money, but I have to file taxes. I use a bigger tax program. So I have to use like the TurboTax. I can't remember if they call it Premier or Self-Employed or whatever, but it was like $178 this year. And of course the evil overlord's all like, why is it so expensive? Then I have to explain it to her. And then I promptly took some money out of my business account to cover the part that we, what our normal taxes would be. I took out about $60 and dropped it into our account. Got to keep the wife happy, right? So anyway, what the heck am I rambling on about? Well, this has nothing to do with this year's taxes, but it could affect your taxes in the future. Found this one on CDL Life. Also, bill seeks to create tax credit up to $7,500 for CDL Class A drivers who drive 1,900 hours per year. So this is a bipartisan act reintroduced. I guess it was introduced a while back, but it's back to be looked at again. It's called the Strengthening Supply Chains Through Truck Driver Incentives Act, and there is no clever acronym to go with that. That's amazing. This is put together by a Democrat from Virginia and a Republican from Wisconsin. And basically, they are trying to address this whole driver shortage issue. Again, like always, driver shortage is in air quotes for me. And what they're saying is these tax credits would bring more people into the industry, and it would keep more truckers happy who are already in the industry, and they'd want to, stick around so they can get these tax credits. So what are we talking about here? Well, first, the reason they're doing this is because of the pandemic. And they were saying that, all through the pandemic, we could not work remotely. We had to go to work and to keep the supply chain going. And they want to recognize us for our hard work in that. So they are trying to get these, tax incentives for us. So the idea here is that for 2 years, you could get a refundable tax credit up to $7,500 for any truck driver who has a Class A CDL and you drove at least 1,900 hours per year, just like the title said. But this legislation would also create a new refundable tax credit up to $10,000 for new truck drivers or individuals who are enrolled in a registered trucking apprenticeship. And there's even some stipulations in here that if you aren't registered for the entire year or only part of the year, that there would be like a prorating kind of a thing, and you still would get some kind of a tax break for driving a truck. So we will see if this goes through. Like I said, this has been promoted before in the past and it went nowhere. So we will see on that. There are a whole bunch of groups endorsing this bill, including the American Trucking Association and a whole bunch of other organizations, including loggers, state trucking associations, all kinds of stuff in here. Oddly enough, though, OIDA seems to be missing from this list. I wonder why that would be. Interesting. But anyway, if you're interested in this tax break that could be coming up in the future, obviously I will keep you up to date on this, and you can go check it out right now at cdllife.com. All right, let's move on to a whole bunch of stories about ELDs. The first one we'll find is over here at overdriveonline.com. Yet another ELD has been put out of service. This one is the All-Ways Track ELD. That's ALL-WAYS, Track ELD. Again, they're suggesting that you immediately get rid of this device because it is not keeping up to standards and you will need to replace it with a compliant ELD. In the meantime, you can switch to paper logs, but be advised, this will not be tolerated forever, so make sure you get in there and replace this All-Ways Track ELD. Wow, this is the 6th ELD that's been revoked by the FMCSA and the 4th this year. Wow, that's crazy. So anyway, I doubt if you need more details on this one, but if you do, you can find it at overdriveonline.com. So the next story we have about e-logs is from freightwaves.com. Federal law designed to make trucking safer may have aggravated worst issues. Okay, this article is really all about how e-logs have affected the industry in general and, as far as safety and driver retention, all that stuff. I'll get into this just a little bit, but this is a fairly long article, but it is a good read if you're interested in this kind of stuff. So anyway, we've talked about this recently in the past where there's been some studies that show that there have been no increased accidents since the hours of service were ignored, basically, with the COVID stuff. And so they've been looking at the hours of service. And of course, every time you talk about the hours of service, you talk about the e-logs also. So the byline for this article really sums up this article nicely. It reads, U.S. government can't confirm whether ELD mandate has improved safety on the road, but studies suggest otherwise. Yeah, that's it. And this is what I find so ironic, that the FMCSA is always about, you have to be able to prove to us if you want an exemption for anything or you want any changes in the rules that you're going to be able to maintain a standard level of safety or improve that level of safety. And they cannot do that here. Yet, are they reversing the e-logs? No. Even they're being asked to get rid of these e-logs, they're still not doing it. They've been asked to get rid of the hours of service rules because the recent studies show that they didn't have any more accidents during the COVID era when people weren't legally obeying the hours of service. No, it doesn't matter. They don't care. They're never going to reverse this stuff. I've said that for years. As long as we've been talking about that, I've been saying that they're never going to reverse it. Give it up. We might as well. But anyway, actually studies show some shocking things about the ELD. One is that tickets have actually gone up, speeding tickets, like in construction zones and things like that, because when truck drivers are up against a fixed clock, they cut corners. So, if you're in a 62 mile an hour truck and, it's governed at 65 or something like that, and you can't make up time in a 70 mile an hour zone, you're going to make up time where it's, 55 or 45 in a construction zone, and you're just going to hammer down through there to try to make good use of your time and make the most money that you can in a day. So tickets have gone up. Now, there is no proof of this, but there has also been a lot of speculations that the ELDs ran drivers out of the industry. We talked about that back at the time where a lot of drivers were saying, if e-logs are implemented, I'm quitting. Well, no, probably a lot of them didn't, but there is probably a lot that did also. So, if you're trying to keep drivers in the industry, mandating ELDs and more strict rules over and even more and more and more strict rules as we go on is not the way to do that. Another issue is driver fatigue. It has been shown that lots of studies that drivers are more tired now with the use of these ELDs because they cannot get the sleep that they need at the times that they need. I think that has lifted a little bit with this 14-hour pause thing where drivers can stop and wait out rush hour traffic and maybe take a nap or just get their eyes away from the road for a little bit, cause them to be less drowsy than just sitting in rush hour traffic, all that kind of stuff. So Really, the crux of this article here is just if those ELDs are actually good for the industry or not. If they've proved to be the safety awesomeness that everyone thought they were going to be. And it does not appear that they are, but it ain't going to matter one lick. Just saying. So, like I said, I just barely covered this article. So and I probably did it very, very poorly because I'm in a hurry. My eyes hurt and I'm tired. It's not because of the E-log, though. But anyway, if you're interested in this one, go over and check it out on freightwaves.com. There I go again, cracking myself up. Okay, so let's stick with freightwaves.com for more ELD stuff. Can FMCSA improve ELD regulations? So we have talked about this one before. This is where the FMCSA is going to address 5 key areas with the ELDs and how they can possibly make them better. None of these are going to be groundbreaking to us, I don't think, but they do have some implications. So the first one is the applicability to pre-2000 engines and glider kits. So if you are unaware, well, I'm largely unaware of these kind of mechanical things, but a glider truck is one that is, it can be any year truck, say it's a 2010, but you put a pre-2000 engine in it so you don't have to run an E-log device. And they're going to look at that and figure out if there is a way to still do the ELDs with these glider kits and these older engines. Because obviously they don't want anybody slipping through the cracks. They don't want to have these exemptions. But, if the engine does not have that little hookup for the ELD to tap into it and all the computer stuff on it, then it can't do it. But they're trying to figure out ways to do this. This article doesn't say it, but one thing I read is that they may be tying it to like GPS. So, like your GPS knows if you start moving, and it knows when you get to 5 miles an hour. Well, so does an ELD. So is the truck or the computer in your truck. So it's kind of the same thing. Like I don't know how they would do exactly on duty, off duty. I guess all that stuff's when you're sitting still, right? So, I don't know. That's going to be interesting. I'm sure if they can figure it out a way to make everyone accountable to E-logs, they will. The second thing they're going to address is ELD malfunctions. So this one is talking about how, right now, if your E-logs mess up, you have to go to paper logs. And they're trying to maybe change that and say, maybe not, because the truck itself is still tracking everything you do. So like the second that ELD starts working, or if you go get another ELD device and put it put it up there and connect it to the truck, it's going to go back and say, hey, all this driving was done, all this on duty and sleeper time was done or stopping time was done. Do you want to claim this? Yes or no? And you'll go back and you'll be able to claim all that stuff. So basically the thought is maybe we don't need to switch to paper logs. Well, we'll see how that one goes. The third one is a boring one. That refers to the removal process, what we were just talking about, when an ELD actually goes bad and it has to be removed from the list. How quickly should it be removed from the list? The FMCSA is considering whether it should immediately removed from the device list or not. They also want to cut the time in half that they give an ELD provider to fix the device. Right now it's 60 days, but they want to reduce that to 30 days. So, if they tell an ELD provider, hey, get this thing up to snuff or get out, well, they've only got 30 days to do it now. So we'll keep our eye on that one. This next one is called technical specifications. And this is really all about giving the driver the ability to put himself or herself in an exempt status. So for instance, like if you are, if you get to your terminal and your truck has to go to the shop, oftentimes you will forget to log off or whatever. I don't, again, know exactly how that's going to help. If you can't remember to put yourself in off duty and disconnect from the truck, then are you going to remember to do exempt status? I don't know. But anyway, basically what they're trying to do with this exempt status is so, a mechanic doesn't get in your truck and take off in it and take it down to the shop, and all of that time gets charged to your drive time and screw up your 10-hour break, or worse, a 34-hour break. That would be really bad. So they're looking at addressing this one. And the last one is ELD certification. Now, currently in the United States, the FMCSA allows each one of these ELD manufacturers to set up the device in the way they want, and they expect them to self-certify these devices. Basically, just, you know what needs to be done, do it. If we catch you not doing it, we will revoke the device. Well, as we've just seen, about 6 of those have been revoked over time, 4 within the last year. And what the FMCSA is considering doing is going with a model like Canada does. We've talked about them and how they do it through a third party. So they've got somebody within the government there in Canada. I don't know who it is. I'm sure some Canadian will straighten me out on this. But there is someone in charge of that actually looks at every single one of these devices. It doesn't say in here, but it is a rather costly thing. I think it was like $20,000 per device. Not like 10 of the same devices, but if you have, say, 5 models of ELDs with your company, it would cost like $20,000 for each one of those to be looked at and gone through to make sure it is valid and up to date and all that stuff. So anyway, those are 5 things we're going to be looking at in the future for ELDs. As they figure this out, God knows how long that will take, I will let you know if anything changes on this stuff. I just brushed over this one pretty quick, so if you're interested in this stuff, head over to freightwaves.com. Well, I mentioned at the beginning of the show that the hours of service exemption for the agriculture industry was under scrutiny. Well, that's what this freightwaves.com article is about. FMCSA's hours of service exemption implicated in fatal truck crash. So what happened here was there was a truck that was operating under the agriculture exemption. We'll explain what that is a little bit more. He was in a milk hauling tank truck. They found that he was fatigued and abusing the hours of service exemption. And it resulted in a crash, multi-vehicle crash that killed 4 people and injured 11. So who's cracking down on this? The National Transport Safety Board. They came down hard on the FMCSA, saying, you guys are allowing this to happen. You don't have enough insight on this. You don't have enough of the crash rate data for these agriculture exemption users. And they just really, cracked the whip on them. So according to the investigators of this crash, they say that the driver had less than a 6-hour opportunity for sleep the day of the crash and regularly worked 70 to 80 hours per week. Now, I can attest to you, I know a gentleman who operates under this and he is safe, but he drives a lot of miles, a lot. And when I heard what this exemption involved, I was frankly pretty flabbergasted. It's a little hard to believe. The craziest thing, I think, is that this ag exemption, you don't even have to log anything within a 150-mile radius of your shipper or your receiver. Pretty sure I have that right. So ideally, you could operate with unlimited hours as long as you never left that 150-mile radius. Crazy, right? I mean, think about it. City drivers, if they're delivering local freight and stuff like that, as long as they stay within a 150-mile radius, they don't have to log anything, but they can still only work a 14-hour day. But with this agriculture exemption, you could run unlimited, literally. Now, for the 150-mile radius, like I said, that's the shipper or the receiver. So here's the way this works. And this is the way a friend of mine explained it to me. Okay, you start your day. You slept at the shipper overnight, you pick up a load of milk in this case, and you head out. First 150 miles, you do not have to log that as driving. That's crazy to me, but there you go. Once you're outside that 150 miles, you do have to start logging it. So now you can log 11 hours of driving, and you can still be 150 miles, say 3 hours from the shipper or from the delivery, and you can log those last 3 hours not driving also. How crazy is that? I mean, this sets you up for 900-mile days, 800-mile days. It's just crazy. I am amazed that this has lasted as long as it has. Again, I understand some of these exemptions because of, like livestock and things like that. Like they don't have to take the 30-minute break. Fine, you got live cattle on board. I understand that. But if you're just hauling like fertilizer or grain or crops or something like that, I don't know. Looks like the FMCSA has been put under the knife here, though, and they are going to really be scrutinized on this. So we may see some crackdowns on this. If nothing else, they will study the crap out of it like they always do for years and years. That's the way it usually works. They put through, okay, well, we're going to study this. We'll keep things the way it is for now, and we'll study it. We'll see how it goes. And hey, if I got any of that hours of service stuff wrong about the ag exemption and you're running under that right now, I think I understand that pretty well. But if I got it wrong, I'm more than happy to hear from you. Send me an email, text, or an audio comment. Send it to truckerdump@gmail.com. And let me know if I described it wrong. Okay. Learn more about this one on freightwaves.com. Well, what do you know? It looks like we're finally making some progress with this truck parking thing. Found this one on thetrucker.com. Truck Parking Improvement Act introduced in Congress. Finally! This one goes all the way from the White House down to the House and the Senate, and everyone is on board. They're pretty sure it's going to pass, and what this is going to do is provide $755 million over 3 years to the construction of truck parking spots. And according to this bill, any of that parking has to be free of charge. They cannot charge for this. So that's great. And it has to be publicly accessible. So, like a company can't get some of this money and put more parking, in their parking lot, at their shipper or whatever. It has to be public for anyone to use. Cool beans. That's the way it should be. Well, the rest of this article just goes on to explain why truck parking is so important and why it's needed for safety reasons and all that good junk. Drivers got to get their sleep. We all know this stuff. I don't need to hash it out with you again, do I? I don't think I do. Anyway, if you're interested in this one, head over to thetrucker.com. And of course, I'll let you know if, or hopefully when, this thing passes. It's bipartisan, so I have high hopes. Stay tuned. Okay, I love a well-written article, especially if there's a lot of snark in it. Well, we got one over here at landline.media. This one's called Under 21 Pilot Program, the party no one is going to. All right. Well, this, of course, is the pilot program where they want to have an apprenticeship setup thing where if you're an under 21 driver, you can get into the trucking industry just by jumping through a lot of hoops and having a lot of extra training. The program was built to accommodate about 1,000 carriers and about 3,000 under 21 apprentice drivers. So let me just read you a paragraph here out of the article. It says, in January 2022, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMCSA, announced the establishment of the pilot program. Soon, those teenagers would be lining up to be truck drivers and everything would be just peachy. Wait, what'd you say? The under 21 pilot program hasn't reached 3,000 participants yet? Okay, nothing to be alarmed about, I'm sure. How many do they have? 2,500? No. 2,000? Still less, you say? 1,000? What? A lot lower? There has to be at least 500, right? Still not close? I give up. How many? I'm sorry. My ears aren't too good. I thought you said 4. Yes, that is correct. Wow. Only 4 apprentices in this program. How nuts is that? I mean, we just said this program was established in January of 2022 and only 4? Wow. And actually, it's not just the drivers. It's the carriers also. They have room for 1,000 carriers. Only 21 have signed up. Well, maybe that's because there's a lot of restrictions on who can do this. Like you can't haul hazmat. You have to have a driver-facing camera, which a lot of companies don't want to have right now. Different stuff like that. And there's a lot of restrictions on who can be a trainer for these apprenticeship programs. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a clue on how well that program is working so far, because as Senator Cindy Hyde Smith from Mississippi said in a Senate subcommittee hearing on Thursday, quote, "This is just alarmingly underwhelming," end quote. Yes, it is. Well, the rest of this article is fairly short, but you can go over and check it out if you want at landline.media. But it's basically OIDA, that's the Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association, their standard argument that there is no such thing as a driver shortage. There is just a inability to retain drivers. They quote studies that say that if driver pay was more, there would be more people who stayed in the industry and more people that would enter the industry. The Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, recently said that they estimate that about 300,000 truck drivers turn in their keys every year. There's too many truckers chasing too little freight, especially right now. So the rates are dropping on that for owner operators. Well, I guess for company drivers too. We just don't see what those rates are. So the last two sentences in this article I will read to you. They say, so instead of a current shortage, the problem seems to be that drivers see the problems in the industry and opt to leave. Maybe the same problems, low wages and poor working conditions, that are making older drivers leave the industry are what's preventing teens from wanting to join in the first place. Good point. Crazy, crazy stuff. 4, folks. 4. Wow. Onward. So let's go from an amazingly small number of young drivers to an alarming number of older drivers. Found this one on Commercial Carrier Journal. That's ccjdigital.com. Truck driver age creeping up, retirement plans on the back burner for many. So the American Trucking Association estimates that the average over-the-road trucker is 46 years old. However, this article says the results of a Commercial Carrier Journal survey, which included more than 800 leased owner-operators and company drivers, their survey says otherwise. Nearly 70% of survey respondents had more than 20 years of experience. That's 69%. Wow. No other experience group of any age reached 10%. So if you work, say, 11 to 15 years or 6 to 10 years, you're less than 10% in the industry. 69% have worked over 20 years in the industry. Man, I thought I was something special with 25, but man, now that I know that, I'm not so dang special, am I? Aw. Now I'm going to go cry. Anyway, this says this average age means it's actually 60 years old, at least among these survey respondents. So not 46, 60. Article says drivers 55 and older ranked saving for retirement their number 2 concern. Topping that list was paying bills each month and their health. Retirement savings was the number 3 concern for the 35 to 54 age group. The youngest group, below 34 years of age, assigned no priority to it whatsoever. That doesn't surprise anyone who used to be young. You never stressed retirement until you get old, right? I mean, if you're smart, you do it young, but a lot of people do not. Another interesting part of this survey was from 2020 through 2022, 52% of respondents said their fleet had raised pay at least twice. That's crazy. Within 2 years, pay went up twice, but they still say that does not, that helps the problem now with the money, but not in the future because people are not saving like they should be. A few other little tidbits here. When these people who were surveyed, when they were asked, when they were told if they were in charge of a fleet, what is the one thing they would do to attract and retain drivers? 18% they would guarantee pay, loads, or mileage to make the take-home pay more predictable. Boy, that's a big one. I'd love to have that. And rounding out the top 3 was 14% was offering excellent health benefits and a 401k. One driver they surveyed quotes, "We need to go back to employer-provided pensions." Well, good luck with that, Mr. Survey Guy. That ain't happened. A lot of places, the ones that are there are not doing well. Kind of like the Social Security system, as the population ages, there's less people to support the older people who are retiring. So that is not a good model. Trust me, I'm union. I have a pension, and it's not necessarily the best model. Honestly, yeah. My company puts pension in, but I could be putting in more if they would just match what I want to put in a 401k, which is probably why they want to do a pension, so they don't have to match it. And it costs them less money. For the record, it's my experience that if a company does offer a pension, they might offer a 401k, but it will not match anything. And you just get the benefits of not being taxed at the time until later on. More interesting facts, among company drivers, 42% said their employer offered some kind of retirement program, and 85% of lease drivers said the same thing. Almost 30% of these drivers surveyed said they are not saving for retirement. And company drivers are doing just a little bit better at 35%. So what are they planning on doing? Well, only 23% of respondents plan to retire by the time they turn 67 years old. That's fewer than the number of drivers who have actually decided that they are going to hold out as long as they can and just continue to drive as long as their health holds out. That's crazy. It says, interestingly enough, the oldest respondent group, drivers 55 years and older, plan to drive the longest, with 13% claiming they plan to drive until the age of 70. One guy says, at 70, I would consider driving part-time. Wow. Now, as to why these drivers aren't retiring, 34% say they need the money. Now, the good news is 37% said they are not wanting to retire because they actually like their job. And another 28% said it's because they simply don't want to not be working. I've heard that from drivers at my company. We have a lot of older drivers here, and they just say they enjoy it. And, when you have a group of guys like a bunch of Teamsters and they've all known each other for years, it becomes, I hate to use the word, but kind of like a family. These guys know each other very well. They're very close friends. And, they know people from all over the country. And, they just like being part of something. As one older driver once told me, he said, "I'm afraid if I go home and retire, I'm just going to sit there and die." So, well, I guess there's something to that. Unfortunately, I'm in a seniority-based system. So until those drivers retire, I'm stuck on the bottom. So please retire by all means. No, seriously. I would like that, but I think if you can keep working as long as you want to keep working, have at it, because Lord knows we're not getting as many new truckers in the industry as everybody thinks we need. Certainly not enough to replace the vast majority of these older drivers who are on their way out eventually when they get tired of driving. Now, this next part does not surprise me at all, because I don't think truckers are any different than the normal population when it comes to saving money for retirement. 63% say that they haven't saved enough money to retire. Alarmingly, 58% of the oldest respondent group said they don't have the money saved for retirement. So they're the ones closest to retirement, and they're not prepared for it either. Most of them said they had retirement funds at one point, but they cashed it out usually to reinvest in their business. Well, live for the moment, I guess. So anyway, if this article is true and this survey is correct, I guess we can just expect to keep seeing a lot of old timers out here. I know of one driver here at my company. I think they said he's 85, something like that. And he just keeps on ticking. Good for him. I guess as long as he's safe, whatever. Personally, I don't want to be working when I'm that old. I don't know about you, but that's not my bag, baby. So anyway, go and check out this one if you're interested in all this retirement stuff. ccjdigital.com. That's Commercial Carrier Journal. With all these broke truckers, I guess I can see why I don't make more money with this podcast. Man, oh man, have the Teamsters been busy. Of course, the Teamsters is the trucking union, the biggest one. Is it the only one? I don't know, honestly, but it is the biggest one by far. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, there have been a lot of union action lately, whether it be Starbucks, Amazon, I can't even think of the other ones, but there's some strange ones that don't normally want to unionize are starting to unionize. We've heard of stories out in California where the teachers union went on strike for 3 days and got everything they wanted. And now, well, we're going to hear about Cisco. Yep, Cisco are Teamsters. In case you didn't know, Cisco Corp is a food distributor. They serve restaurants, businesses, and public schools, stuff like that. Well, after weeks of contract negotiation and not being able to come to agreement, the shops in Louisville and Indianapolis have gone on strike. Now, the Teamsters represent about 10,000 Cisco workers nationwide, and it looks like maybe what they're planning on doing is what they've done before with another couple of Cisco plants where they're going to get other Cisco plants to strike on behalf of these ones who don't have a deal at the time, because each one of these places reaches their own deal. It's not like a nationwide thing, and that's just the way I understand it. That's the way Cisco has this set up. They put each one of their distribution centers kind of like its own business so it can bargain its own stuff according to where they live and what the market will provide. So, they might be willing to pay drivers more in California or New York than they would in Joplin, Missouri, so to speak, because the cost of living is very low here. So anyway, the thing that they're going for here is healthcare, better wages, they've got excessive overtime they'd like to get rid of. There's harassment within the production. There's irregular schedules and unreasonable work rules. Wow, that sounds like a lot. So anyway, who knows how long these things go on? As I've heard in the past, a strike is good for no one. The company is losing business, the drivers are not getting paid, and everybody out in the public just looks at both parties and says, get over it, make nice, and get back to work. But they don't really know what's going on, obviously, unless you work there. Or you run the business, I guess. So it looks like here that there was a contract that was offered on March 8th, so it's not like they weren't trying, but I guess the first attempt was pretty lame, and it was soundly rejected by all the Teamsters, the employees there. Well, I guess we will see how long this lasts. Hopefully it won't be long. I hate to think of a long standoff for a strike. It just doesn't look like any fun to be out there picketing, and, I know people just need to get back to work, right? We just want to work, but we do want to get paid fairly, have good benefits, be treated well, and all that stuff. So I will keep you up to date on this one. And by the way, you may be thinking, why do I care about the union and them going on strike? Well, the reason you care about this is because whether you like it or not, the union kind of sets the standards for truck driver pay in general. Not just union jobs, but LTL are the best paying jobs in this industry. And I've heard this from many sources that is really what it comes down to, is that these over-the-road companies are just trying to stay within a ballpark. Most of them can't touch what the LTL industry is paying. That's why I love it so much over here. So that's why it's important to you, because what's that old saying? All ships rise, or something like that. Anyway, the idea is that if the union gets more pay, everybody else's pay is probably going to go up too, to try to stay, on the same level, or at least within the same distance from it, if you get my drift. Drift, get it? Ships? Yeah, God, I'm lame. Anyway, let's move on to the next story, which of course is about unions. Yeah. For the record, that last article was on landline.media. This next one is on teamster.org. And yes, I saw that because I am a Teamster and I see this website. This one is all about the Teamsters beginning negotiations at ABF Freight. Last week I think I said ABF Freight was redundant because ABF stands for Arkansas Best Freight. So you're saying Arkansas Best Freight. But apparently they call it ABF Freight. Interesting. So anyway, the Teamsters represent about 8,000 members at ABF. and their agreement expires on June the 30th. So they are getting a bit of an early jump on it. The way I understand it, I can't remember if I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but basically when you're a Teamster, well, if you're in a union in general, you do not want to wait until the last second to try to push through something and reach an agreement, because that's not good for anyone. Like I said, it could end up in a strike, and worse, it can really be bad for the customers because they don't know what's going on, especially with a trucking company. They don't want to do business with someone who is in negotiations and getting close to deadline because they're afraid their freight is going to get hung up in the strike. You know, these Teamsters go on strike, they're not going to deliver my freight, and now it's just sitting there. Well, I'll just send it with a non-union carrier. And, well, obviously that's not good for the union companies or the Teamsters. So ideally you want to try to get this mashed out ahead of time. So it looks like they're getting an early jump on this. This one's going to be an interesting one to watch because ABF is known to be a very sound company. They are very stable. They make good profits and all that good stuff for a union company. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Now, the next story is the problem child. This one involves Yellow. I found this one on ccjdigital.com. That's Commercial Carrier Journal. Yellow and Union locked in war of words. Okay. So if you're keeping track of this, which I am on Facebook, there are lots of letters flying back and forth between Yellow and the union. And it is not pretty. There's lots of accusations about neither party acting in good faith, trying to reach this agreement. Now, keep in mind, this is not the contract. This is just a change of operation that they're trying to go through to change the way that their company works. But the union is saying this change of operation is violating the current contract, and you can't do that. If you want to make these kinds of changes, you have to open the contract, which means everything's up for grabs again. So basically, the Teamsters could ask for more money again, which is, of course, what they want, and, of course, what Yellow does not want. So it is a mess. It's a pissing match, it looks like, and lots of rude letters are being written back and forth. Lots of accusations, lots of misinformation is being spread, and it is just not pretty. And like I said, the sad thing is that contract is not up until April of 2024, I believe, and that is a long time off to be pissing on each other already. So this one is going to be ugly, and honestly, it wouldn't surprise me at all if it ended in a strike, because everyone knows Yellow is in financial trouble. They borrowed the $700 million from the government. They were scrutinized for that. As far as I know, they still have that money and they used it, but you know, they're not looking good in the public eye when it comes to that. And you know, the sad thing is that the Teamsters have to watch it here, because they can go in, you know, like we've talked about, the Teamsters are kind of militant now with their new leader, Sean O'Brien. We talked about him getting into a argument with, actually the senator getting into an argument with him a couple episodes ago. And that Teamster guy did not back down at all. He's not afraid of much, and he uses the word militant quite a lot. But here's the thing. You got to be careful with these contracts. Like I say, ABF has money. Yellow does not. So you can probably be a little bit more firm with ABF, but with Yellow, you're too firm and they'll just shut the doors on you. And then you've lost, 22,000 employees? Yeah, that's a lot. And I don't think a new union president really wants that to be said of him, that, hey, I got good contracts for ABF and T-Force and UPS, all of which are coming up pretty fast here, but I lost 22,000 jobs with the Yellow thing. And it's going to be an interesting one to watch. Stay tuned. I will keep you informed as things go along. And with that, I believe we're done with union stuff. Thank God, right? Yeah, trust me. This union stuff does matter for the trucking industry. Just trying to keep you informed. Again, found this one on ccjdigital.com. So, back to the story that just won't quit. California AB5. Yeah. Found this one on freightwaves.com. California trucking eyes equal protection argument in AB5 litigation. So this one's not going to take long. I'm just going to say that AB5 was allowed to happen. That is where the independent contractors out in California, all the trucking ones, they were not allowed to be independent contractors anymore, and they had to figure out a way to either, they had to move out of the state, or they had to become an employee, and then there's some weird workarounds and all that stuff. Well, now there has been something new added to this, and that is because the companies Uber and Postmates were awarded exemptions to this rule. Now, if you know anything about Uber and Postmates, they are basically independent contractors. They were, but AB5 was trying to say, no, you don't qualify. But then they lifted that, and they're now allowing Uber and Postmates drivers to be considered independent contractors. Now, isn't that interesting? Because when you're driving an Uber, Uber controls who you go get, right? Just like when you're leased to a trucking company, they control where you go pick up freight and all that stuff, for the most part, as far as I know. With Uber, you can't just stop off and pick up somebody randomly and take them somewhere and charge them for it. That's not allowed. So the argument here is, if it's okay for Uber and Postmates to be independent contractors, why is it not okay for the trucking industry? Now, whether we actually believe that lease operators are independent contractors or not is up for debate, but that has always been allowed, and it seems like one of those things that probably just ought to be exempt. But, I'm not a lawmaker, so we're actually going to go into this a little bit more. Listener Maverick has some comments on this independent contractor thing coming up quickly in the listener feedback segment. So again, that's really all this is to this, is they are just kind of reopening this case and saying, hey, if it works for Uber and Postmates, then it should work for us also. Unfortunately, I will keep you up to date on this one. Freightwaves.com. Okay, to finish up, let's head over to cdllife.com for yet another survey. Yeah, I know we've done a lot of these, but this one's got something really funny in it that I thought I would share. But first, let me tell you a little bit about this survey. It was done by JW Surety Bonds, and they surveyed 386 truck drivers. 60% of those were female, while the remaining 40% were male. So here are some of the findings that I found interesting. 79% of male truckers frequently feel lonely on the road, compared to only 65% of female truckers. Wonder why that is. 59% of male truckers feel fairly paid. 26% feel underpaid, and 15% feel overpaid. Who are these 15% who feel like they're not worth the money they're getting? Interesting. 52% of male truckers make under $50,000. 47% make $50,000 to $100,000, and only 1% make over $100,000. That's interesting. I wonder if that is just company drivers, owner-operators too. It doesn't say. But hey, if you're one of the few making over $100,000, you can now say you're part of the 1%. There you go. Now, when it comes to safety, 68% of female truckers feel safe when they're working, compared to 78% of male truckers. That makes sense. Males less to worry about than women when it comes to their personal safety. 92% of female truckers feel respected by fellow female truckers. That's awesome. 74% of male truckers feel respected by female truck drivers. That's interesting. Now, here's the funny one, and why sometimes I just think surveys are just meant to laugh at, because sometimes they are ridiculous and contradict themselves. Here's a perfect example. 90% of male truckers believe young people should get into trucking. But guess what? 92% of male truckers regret getting into trucking, compared to 66% of female truckers. Okay, so you get 99% of male truckers saying, hey, young people, you should get into this industry, but I regret it. Really? How does that work? Why would you tell people to come into your industry if you now regret it and wish you had it to do all over again? doesn't make any sense to me. Surveys. What are you going to do about them? If you want to see a lot of infographics on this stuff, head on over to cdllife.com. They talk about the kind of self-defense stuff females have in their trucks. Self-defense, pepper spray, 62%. Wow, 58% of a knife, 41% of a firearm. Ooh, hope you're not a company driver. If you are, you're hiding that thing. 39% of alarm system, 37% of a bat or a club, 30% of tasers, 27% extra locking system, whatever that is. Interesting. Yeah, there's some cool stats over here for sure. So go check it out, cdllife.com. And that, in my squeaky chair, are finished with the news. No truck or grub segment this week, but if you are interested in sending one of those in, have at it. What's truck or grub, you might ask? Well, that's where you, the trucker, has a favorite place to eat that you can get to in a truck. Tell me where it is. Give me a website if you've got one. Tell me what the food's like, what your favorite meal is, what the atmosphere is like, where you park, maybe their hours, all that good junk. Now, these are audio comments only. Just pull out your phone, find the voice memo app, turn your truck off, record me a little segment, 3 minutes or less. Tell me all about it and send it off to truckerdump@gmail.com. Haven't had a trucker grub in a while. Looking forward to getting my next one. And by the way, we mentioned that new TA restaurant that is in the Perrysburg, Ohio TA. It's a new fork and something, I don't remember, but it's supposed to be a little bit fancier. If anybody can make it in there to go check that out. I actually drove right past it last night, but I did not have time to stop because, well, I'm an overnight driver who does LTL freight. Got to move that crap, right? So anyway, if you find yourself in Perrysburg at the TA, go in there and check that out and then send me a trucker grub, please. But as disappointing as it may be that there is no trucker grub, we do have listener feedback and we got a lot of it. So let's continue on with this long podcast and make it an even longer podcast. What say?
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
All right, let's first hear from Sean, who I believe is the same chicken who won't send in an audio comment. But he did write a comment over at Slack. In the Slack group. For the record, the Slack group is a bunch of truckers. It is a private group. You can get an invitation to it, though. All you have to do is send me an email to truckerdump@gmail.com requesting that invite. A lot of experienced drivers in there, a lot of newbies in there. And if you are a newbie, it's a great place for you to be in case you have questions in the middle of the night and you don't have a mentor handy. Somebody's always in there to help answer questions. Really great group of people. We don't harass you. We don't make fun of you. We just answer questions and cut up and have a good time in there. So please consider joining the Trucker Dump Slack group if you're interested, or you can join the Trucker Dump Facebook group if you're on Facebook. I've been trying to post a little bit more over on there when I find interesting or funny stuff, but I'm still not as active over there as I am in the Trucker Dump Slack group. But I'm trying. So anyway, Sean writes, are we still doing this laws of trucking thing? Okay, that's the thing where you can make something up. Like if something happens to you often, you can consider it a law of trucking. So for instance, Sean has one. He says, every time your alternator goes out, you have to replace it in the middle of the night on the side of the road at under 15 degrees. Oh yeah, it's always on a day I have to drive 1,000+ miles that day. 1,000+ miles. Guess what Sean is? Yes, an agriculture driver. Be careful, Sean. We heard what happened to the milk caller. We don't want that to happen to you. Thanks for writing in. Since you won't send an audio comment. Pathetic. Next up, we're going to hear from Maverick. Now, this is a long one, but I've been overlooking this one for a long time. Sorry about that, Maverick. Maverick writes, don't worry about content. We will always help you out. Yeah, you are certainly helping me out lately, Maverick, and all of you trucker dumpers. Really happy to have you guys contributing to the show. It really helps things. He says, okay, first thing, the clearinghouse loophole. Okay, this is where we're talking about the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse loophole that was in there, and they were trying to fix something because it was allowing truck drivers to slip through the gaps, and I was not exactly sure I understood what that meant. But here's what Maverick says. He says they're closing it by if you get a pre-employment screening done within 12 months after the pre-employment, if a failure comes through, they will alert the new employer of the failure. So no more failing and running to a new employer and them not finding out till the next annual. Okay, so I get that they're going to find out sooner, but they are going to still hire you, I guess, because they're not going to know before they hire you. Because they do have a little bit of time, I guess. That's interesting. Well, I see what they're talking about here. So he goes on to a different subject, and he says, I do find it funny that you bring up stuff from OIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Driver Association, but not truckload carriers. Neither of these groups are looking out for company drivers. If their interests happen to align with drivers, that's just a coincidence. They are both groups representing trucking businesses. It is kind of like the AB5 rule in California. Well, hang on a second. We'll get into that in a minute. Okay. As far as the truckload carriers, honestly, I had never heard of the organization. I looked them up and they don't even have news on their website. So I guess maybe that's why I've never discovered them. I tend to have my regular sources, as you know, and truckload carriers is not one of them because they don't talk about news. They do release some press statements and stuff, but it's always about stuff they are doing. So unfortunately, that ain't going to help a lot. Now, hopefully, and I think I'm pretty fair about this with OIDA, I've said many times that their beliefs do not align with mine because I'm a company driver and they are looking after owner operators. So I hope I continue to stress that sometimes I just don't agree with them. Sometimes they are right on target, but other times they are way off and have their own agenda, obviously, just as the American Trucking Association has their own agenda. I just don't want to be too one-sided with this. I don't want to, always be on the side of the company driver or always be on the side of the owner operator. Both have good points sometimes. Sometimes they just clash, and one or the other just doesn't make any sense. Need an example? Well, I thought it was really stupid, if you remember right, when OIDA was trying to get small carriers exempt from the ELD mandate. They were like, they shouldn't have to do this because it's going to cost them too much money to put electronic devices in it. My argument was, well, those small carriers, those one or two trucks are probably going to be the ones most likely to cheat. So they're the ones who probably need to be on e-logs the most. Whereas on the other side, the ATA, the American Trucking Association, insists that there is a huge driver shortage. And I side with the OIDA on this one, that there's not a huge driver shortage. There is just a shortage of drivers who want to stay in the industry because they're not paid well enough. The conditions aren't good enough, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I hope I'm equal to both parties here. And if I can find a truck specific, like a company driver specific website that would share more insight into stuff like this, I would gladly go to them. But OIDA writes a lot of opinion pieces, and I love that kind of stuff. So that's why I get the news over there. So anyway, let's get back to it. He says they are both groups representing trucking businesses. It is kind of like the AB5 rule in California. This rule attempts to address a massive problem that is hard to squish on both sides of the border. He's from Canada. He says up north here, we can it the driver incorporated model where you are an employee with payments. I don't get what that sentence means. Anyway, let's see if it clarifies here. Most of these businesses are employees. They own no equipment and basically sell themselves short and lose out on employee benefits that generally have to be paid by drivers working for legitimate companies that are trying to do the right thing while getting undercut on rates because they save the money from employee and employer payroll taxes. Yes, they do. That's why they like the lease operators. The lease operator deal, you own the equipment. The only issue that presents is when you only work for one employer and they basically control the work. If you're a lease operator and if you're a lease to, for example, Prime. Yeah. Well, let's use that example since driver Chris Mack drives through Prime and I use them a lot. He says, if you are in Atlanta and Prime has a load that pays $1.15 a mile, but the Amazon warehouse down the road has a load that pays $3.25 a mile, and you can pay Prime a daily usage charge for the trailer, then you are not an employee. You are a contractor. The better thing is if you own the trailer. If you are forced to take the Prime load, you are an employee with a truck payment. Yeah, that is the question, isn't it? It sure seems like. I've talked about that before. I've always been skeptical of whether these lease operators are independent contractors or not, because they are largely controlled by the company that they're leased onto. It's an interesting dichotomy there. Is that the right word? Dichotomy. I like to use big words. Sometimes I don't know what they mean, but I like to use big words. So anyway, he goes on to say, owner-operators are concerned about hours of service is because the only two ways they can compete against the major carriers is speed or price. Only way you can do better on either is extend the logbook. Company drivers should be working on getting better detention time pay and the overtime provision removed from the Fair Labor Standards Act. True. And hourly pay for things not in their control. Oh, you mean like the union does for me? He goes on. Hours of service is only an issue if you're not getting paid. I think you mentioned that multiple times throughout this podcast. Yep, I did, because like I just did a second ago, union. I get paid for everything I do. If you're getting paid for 14 hours properly, one, you likely won't work 14 all the time, and you wouldn't worry about it if you did. I like the Teamsters model where daily pay is based on 8 hours a day. Those are just my thoughts that have been floating in my head for a while. Take care, Todd. Well, thank you, Maverick. I like thoughts that float around in your head. I like them even better when you put them down in text, or even better, it'd be nice to have a Canadian accent on the podcast. Just saying, Maverick. Am I going to have to start guilting you into doing an audio clip also? Maybe. I'll work on that. All right. Well, that covers Maverick and all those topics we covered there. That's awesome. What do we got next? Yes, feedback from the last episode. This is regarding the fact that I was able to use the split sleeper berth and pause my 14-hour day in a day cab. And I was wondering how that happened and if that was actually legal. And I went through my e-log department and they didn't really have any good answers for me. Well, I have some updates on that. But before we do that, let me tell you what the Trucker Dump Slack folks told me about this topic. First up, Kool-Aid Overdose writes, regarding your split sleeper berth extension dilemma, as a day cab driver who is home every night, my company doesn't let us use the split sleeper berth extension. As it was explained to me, the split sleeper berth is only valid if both ends of the split were spent in the sleeper berth. I think there is a gray area that allows someone coming from home or a hotel into their truck. But regardless, it's my understanding that both ends of the split need to be marked as a sleeper berth, which can't or shouldn't be done with a day cab since there is no sleeper berth with which to use. Okay, I'm going to have to correct you on this one, Kool-Aid, because only the longer period has to be marked in the sleeper berth. The shorter period can be sleeper berth or off duty. So there is that. But what you say about your company not allowing it, well, there's a trend. You just started there. Mr. Steve writes, I'm not allowed to use the split break or the big 16-hour day. I'm in a day cab and I go home every night. My company doesn't recognize them. Well, that's kind of the crux of it, isn't it? It's like sometimes the FMCSA makes a rule, but the company still won't allow it. You know, for instance, there's not a whole lot of restrictions on the PC right now, but your company can still restrict you to, say, 20 miles a day or something like that. Well, you know, because Mr. Steve is a day cab driver and he does go home every day, technically he could use the big day, the big 16-hour day, but he is not allowed by his company. Interesting. Maverick's back, And he writes, well, I loved your excellent explanation on the split sleeper berth provision, and you are right when you have a sleeper berth, but being a day cab, you don't. This actual issue is on my list of things you can do in Canada, but you can't in the U.S. They have a split sleeper berth rule, but not a split off-duty rule. U.S. rule, you must have 10 consecutive hours off duty. Being a day cab driver, you only have 3 lines off duty, on duty, and driving. If you look up the definition of sleeper berth, it does not say hotel. No, it does not. You are correct, Maverick. Although a lot of times in the explanation of the split sleeper berth rule, it says the 2 rest periods. So, yes, the initial rule says sleeper berth, but when they were describing it, they describe it as 2 rest periods. And that is what I am basing all this angst on, honestly. Now, I will point out that something I didn't say earlier that you made a point of here, that you, as a day cab driver, you only have 3 lines of on your log: off duty, on duty, and driving. That's the same for my company. My sleeper berth is there, but it is grayed out. I cannot access it whatsoever. But like I said, if I did off duty, normally it'd be 10 hours or more in the hotel, and then I would come back, and somewhere within my shift I would do 2 or 3 hours off duty. It was giving me that break. We'll have more on that here in a little bit. Austin writes, he says, you're right, I run a day cab and hotels aren't included in that. I always showed off duty for when I was at the hotel. The last level 1 I had, I asked the inspector and he said that's the case also. Okay, so now we got a DOT officer involved here and he says it's illegal. Now, Maverick, you went on and said something that I'm not sure I quite understand. I might need some clarification for the next episode. If I had seen this earlier, I would have clarified it before this episode, but it's too late now. Anyway, he writes, this is the way the rule is written in Canada that allows us to do exactly what you want to do. Off-duty time, other than the mandatory 8 consecutive hours, can be spread throughout the day in blocks greater than 30 minutes. The 8 hours can be sleeper berth or off duty. Off duty time. Yeah, I'm not getting that one. I think I'm going to need some further explanation. Imagine that, a Trucker Dump podcast where I need further explanation. What a surprise. Okay, now back to my issue and what actually happened. After I had talked to my ELD guy and he had acknowledged that there was such thing as a 14-hour pause, and he had looked it up and understood all that, I still have not heard back from the safety department. And I put in a call to him, a couple calls, and I have not heard back from him. But here's what happened. The setting to enable split sleeper berth in my log vanished. Yep, I was trying to tell everybody that I work with how to do it, because we would often take advantage of this, like if we break down or something like that, we would use it to get home or, to get where we're going and extend our day and not have our day, cut short and we lose money for it. So everybody wanted to use it, and I was the only one who knew how to actually enable the settings. So I had my steward in there, and I was getting ready to show him, and I pulled it up, and lo and behold, it was gone. And I was like, uh-oh. Now, I have not verified. I've asked these guys to verify in their logs if it is in theirs or not. I thought, surely they didn't just delete it out of mine because I'm the one that raised the question. Surely it's everybody, but I think it is well, I know it wasn't working for anyone by default. It was turned off, like I said in the last podcast, but now they've actually removed it, at least in mine, and I'm guessing in everybody else's too. So, well, I guess everybody's got a right to be pissed at me if they want, because they can't use the extension anymore. But at the same time, I look at it like, if we shouldn't be doing it legally, we shouldn't be doing it. And, well, I got further confirmation from that, unfortunately. And here's what it is. I wrote a question to the FMCSA regarding this split sleeper berth. I wrote, I work for an LTL company that uses Omnitrack's ELDs. We drive day cabs and sleep in hotels for our 10-hour break. Obviously, we don't have sleeper berth. Question, When I get delayed at a customer or terminal and log off duty for over 2 hours, can I legally take advantage of the 14-hour pause since we don't technically have a sleeper berth to complete the 7-hour period? Omnitrax has been giving back this time automatically since the rules changed in 2020, but I'm constantly debating drivers about whether this is legal or not since we don't technically have sleeper berths. My counter argument has always been that a reputable company like Omnitrax wouldn't allow it if it was illegal. I just assume there's some sort of loophole that allows LTL day cab drivers to do this legally by treating hotel time as equivalent to sleeper berth time. Otherwise, the new hours of service flexibility wouldn't be treating all road drivers equally. I would appreciate any clarification on this, including any citations or sources. He wrote me back a short and sweet one. This is from a gentleman at the FMCSA in the Driver and Carrier Operations Division. He writes, "Thank you for your inquiry. First off, the breaks you mention in your email do not pause the 14-hour driving window or pause the 14-hour clock. If you do not have a sleeper berth in the vehicle as you state, then any short breaks or any breaks, period, count, along with all driving and on-duty time are counted in the calculation of the available 14-hour driving window. Once a driver's day starts and they are on duty, they are not allowed to drive a commercial motor vehicle on a public road after 14 hours from that time have expired until they take a minimum of 10 hours consecutive off-duty time. I hope this information is of assistance to you." Well, it was. Unfortunately, it's not what I wanted to hear. And this has prompted me, I believe, to go to the FMCSA and see if I can get a rules change on this because, well, it's just insane. And I'll go ahead and read you the email I wrote back to him, and I'm waiting for a response from him and have not gotten one back. Now, I take that as a good sign because I'm hoping I raised enough questions to him that maybe he had to take this to a supervisor and say, hey, this kind of doesn't make sense. So here's what I wrote to him. "Dear Sir, can you please provide clarification on what the practical difference is between logging sleeper berth and logging off duty at a hotel? Both are 7+ hour rest periods that should be meeting the sleeper berth requirement. Where you're spending your sleeping time should have no relevance. One might even argue that sleeping in a hotel or at home gives you better sleep than sleeping in a truck at a noisy truck stop or bouncing down the road with a co-driver at the wheel. As for the shorter rest period, it only requires off-duty time, not sleeper berth. So trying to argue that you need a sleeper berth to get the benefits of this break seems illogical. Not to mention, just because a driver can log sleeper berth does not mean they are actually sleeping. Same goes for a hotel for that matter. An off-duty break is an off-duty break. If the rules allow a driver with a sleeper berth to pull over for 2 hours to grab a meal and that extends their 14-hour workday, and I, a day cab driver, spends 2 hours sitting in a break room eating my meal and chatting with other drivers, what is the difference other than the fact that they have a sleeper berth in a truck sitting out in the parking lot and I don't? Another thing to point out is that a driver could be doing the exact same job as a day cab driver, only he is driving a truck with a sleeper berth. He still goes home and sleeps in his bed every night, but somehow he gets the benefit of the 14-hour pause. But the day cab driver does not? I do realize you are not the one who made this rule and you are simply trying to enforce what is on the books. I probably need to go through the difficulty of applying to the FMCSA for a revision and clarification of this rule. Thank you for your time. Anything you can do to clarify the logic behind the FMCSA's obsession with the sleeper berth regarding this particular rule would be appreciated. Sincerely, Stud Muffin. No, I didn't sign it, Stud Muffin. But that is what Siri calls me. Yeah. Well, this is good. This is going to prompt me to get into more of the FMCSA and how they do their business on their end, because I am definitely going to pursue this. I don't know when I'm going to have time to, but I'm just going to have to make time to figure it out. Anyway, I will keep you posted on that as we go along. But for now, it looks like I cannot use that extension anymore. I'm a little pissed about it, and it will probably screw me at some point or another soon. But, well, what can I do about it? The law is the law, right? Sometimes I hate it that, there's the letter of the law, which is what this is talking about. It says sleeper berth, so it means sleeper berth. but there is also the spirit of the law, which just means you need to get 2 rest periods. That's what I'm going to be fighting for. That's what I'm going to be arguing for. And hopefully I'll be able to get this done for everyone. Yay, go for me. And guess what? If I do it, no one will still buy the books or donate. That's just the way it works. Truckers, what are you going to do? I picked the wrong industry to cater to. That's for sure. You going to try to sell something? Don't do it in the trucking industry. Wow. All right. Well, with that, I say let's just get out of here because this is a mega long episode. Of course, good God, looks like at the recording time, this is a hour 50 so far. Of course, that'll shrink quite a bit when I edit out all my goofs and errors and put in the bloopers, as I always do. Oh, crapiola. Speaking of bloopers, I'm not done. There's one more. This one comes from Sean O'Neill. This is not the Sean who is afraid to turn an audio comment. Sean writes, "Hi, Todd. Just finished listening to episode 110. I was going to wait to make any comments since I'm 8 years behind, but I have to thank God no one took you up on your request as it is now the year 2023 and I am seeing more regular posts. I'm listening from the beginning. Hopefully I'll be caught up in a month or so. Thank you for the great job, Sean." Okay. Honestly, I had no idea what Sean was talking about here. There's been many times that I have talked about getting out of the trucking industry and wanting to, and episode 110 was probably around that time, but I had to go and find out what he was talking about exactly. And I'm glad I did, because Trucker Dump episode 110 was the one called Jabbering with Jared. And that was a really fun episode that had very little to do with trucking. I had my middle nephew, Jared. He was probably, I don't know, maybe 14 at the time. I think we discussed that he was 14, I think. And he went out on the road with me for a couple of weeks. And it was all about that. We talk about some of the things we did on it. We talk about farting a lot because, hey, uncle, nephew, that's what we do. It was just a really fun conversation. But what I learned from it is what I had said that Sean was talking about. And what specifically I had said is that if I am still trucking in the year 2020, somebody please come and shoot me in the head. Well, here I am. It's 2023. Not only am I still trucking, but I'm doing this podcast once a week now. Wow. Anyway, I found that really funny. Another thing I found funny in here was that at one point in the episode, I was talking about an Apple Watch, and I said I just have no need for an Apple Watch, and I haven't found a need for an iPad yet. Guess what? I love my Apple Watch that I've had for a couple of years, and I love my iPad that I've had for a couple of years. Yeah, I know. It's one of those things you don't think you need it until you find out you can't live without it. And ironically enough, there was one more thing I learned from this episode. Not too long ago, I was talking on this podcast about how at the end of the episode, my nephew Jake, when he was 8 years old, said, "Todd doesn't know what he's doing." And he's got a bit of a speech impediment because he has partial hearing, and it's just cute as a button to me. So I used it. Well, I recently told him that I used that, and he had completely forgotten that I had been using this, and it's been in every episode since the beginning. I think it's been in every episode since the beginning. But regardless, it's funny because I mentioned this on the podcast recently that sometime I'm going to have to get him to record that same thing. Todd doesn't know what he's doing, only in his deep voice that he's got now. And funnily enough, I actually did that at the end of this episode. So I actually heard what I had just talked about on this episode. How cool is that? So if you want to hear that and what he sounds like now, stick around till the end of the podcast, which is coming up right now. Thank God this episode is over. It's a long one. I'm tired. My eyes are burning. And now I just have to edit this long mega episode tomorrow, which means I'm not getting any sleep tomorrow either. Thankfully, like I said, the evil overlord does not listen to the podcast. She says my podcasting voice is not like my normal voice, and it sucks. Well, I'll acknowledge that. I think most people who talk to me in person know that I don't talk exactly like this in real life, but pretty close, I think. What do you think, Driver Chris Mack? You talk to me more than probably anybody else on the phone. I guess probably more in the feedback segment, I talk more naturally because I'm just speaking. But if I'm reading, my voice definitely reads differently. I think everyone does that, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Anyway, I have been told by other people, like in my reviews on iTunes and stuff, that my voice is annoying or the way I talk is annoying. But hey, you can't make everybody happy, right? So with that, I think I will just shut my giant pie hole and let's get out of here. Okay, all I'm going to do today is point you to abouttruckdriving.com, where you'll find all 195 episodes of the Trucker Dump podcast, including some extras. You can also find more information on both my books. I'm really proud of how both those sales pages came out, so please go check them out when you're really bored. Also, I've got some free stuff, including PDFs on how to axle out a load and the best heater settings for your winter conditions. And don't forget, you can download the free versions of both the intro and outro songs for free. Both are great songs. And of course, there's the Help the Show tab where you can learn all the ways you can help financially. So, I guess that's it. As always, thanks for listening. So until next time, drive safe and stay out of my way. Well, the rest of this article just goes on to talk about why we need trucking, and we are truckers. We know why we need Did I say trucking? I meant truck parking? Is that what I said? Go back. None of these are going to be groundbreaking. Wow. All right, I found this next one over on Commercial Carrier Journal. That is ccjdigital.com. Truck driver. That's not the way I wanted to start that. I don't remember if I told you this or not, but if I did, forgive me. I did call back the ELD guy the next day and ask him. I did say that for sure. I remember it now. Losing my freaking mind. So, let's continue on with this long podcast.
Hey, Jake, say Todd doesn't know what he's doing.
Todd does not know what he's doing.
Say Todd doesn't know what he's doing.
Todd doesn't know what he's doing.
Say it. Todd doesn't know what he's doing.
Todd doesn't know what he's doing.
Like that?
What?
Just say, Todd doesn't know what he's doing.
Todd doesn't know what he's doing.
Todd doesn't know what he's doing.